Folks, in case you haven't heard, this racist bigot, white supremacist, Steve Bannon, is out as far as his position on the National Security Council. This guy got a little too cute in trying to obliviate the rhetoric of Donald Trump by creating false stories. Now, as you have to be aware, Donald Trump made that ridiculous tweet about former President Obama wiretapping Trump Towers and the people in his campaign and the committee that he formed, his transition committee. And as soon as I, as well as a whole lot of other people, heard that, we knew that it was a bunch of BS. There's one thing about Obama. You might not like his policies. You might think that he was a little weak. A lot of people do. A lot of black folks think he wasn't in our corner. But the one thing that you really will never be able to say about him is that he was dirty. He might not have done everything that everybody wanted him to do, but whatever he did, it was 100% above board because he knew the cameras were always on him and everybody was always looking to get him. And that's on both sides of the aisle, to be honest with you. So when Mr. Trump came out with that ridiculous tweet, he was asked for evidence. And here's where the Republicans were jumping all over the place, trying to back him up. But after a week or so, they just realized they couldn't. So that's when you started getting the alternative facts, like when Mr. Spicer, Sean Spicer that is, came out and said, well, he didn't really mean wiretapping because he put those in quotation marks. But then when it was pointed out to him that he put wiretapping in quotation marks once or twice, but he put wiretapping without quotation marks in his tweet a couple of times, and that he was calling former President Obama a bad and sick person, which means that he specifically was responsible for it. Well, that story changed. And it was Mr. Spicer and people like Mr. Bannon that were trying to change the narrative as far as surveillance of American citizens. All that was being done in order to try to get away from the fact that Trump and his coalition team colluded with the Russians in order to get Trump elected. And there has been testimony pretty much to that effect in front of Congress, though you probably haven't heard that particular testimony because the left have been a bunch of wimps about it, and the right damn sure isn't going to put that out there. So you won't see that on Fox News anywhere. You might have seen about 5 minutes worth on MSNBC or CNN. But now here is the part that pertains to today. Mr. Bannon, again, was removed from his position. And the White House gave this a bullshit story that he was only on the permanent board for the National Security Council in order to watch Mike Flynn. Now, folks, if there's one person that you have to be able to trust with no questions asked, it's got to be your national security advisor. And if you have any question about that guy, he's the wrong guy for the job, period. Now, you know, obviously Mr. Trump had a lot of confidence in this guy, especially since he was with him from the very beginning. And this guy, I'm telling you, if you go back and look, he was a raving maniac. But all the handwriting should have been on the wall. When he was relieved from his position, working in the government for President Obama, he couldn't get a job as a dog catcher. So what did he do? He went over to the other side. He went over and took money from the Russians, which he didn't have permission to do, by the way, because even though he retired from the military, he still could have been called back to active duty. So he was supposed to get permission from the military in order to take that job with RT TV, which is a Russian propaganda television station. He also was a paid consultant for the government of Turkey, but he never registered as a lobbyist for Turkey. He only did that retroactively, and I'm wondering when the government is going to go after his butt on that, because that was a crime, plain and simple. But you won't hear a lot about that one. But anyway, I digress. Once Mr. Flynn was out, the White House is claiming that when they brought in J.T. McFarland, there was no longer a need for a babysitter, and that's why Mr. Bannon was removed as one of the permanent members of the National Security Council. That is a smokescreen. Let me tell you what I actually think happened. Donald Trump was getting his butt kicked on this wire tapping situation. So, Mr. Bannon dug down deep and used one of the assets that he had accumulated in the White House. What do I mean by asset? Well, Mr. J.T. McFarland, when he came in, and he was the National Security Advisor. He was Trump's second choice, by the way. But when he came in, he specifically asked for certain authorities and powers, which the president obviously had promised him. Well, one of the things that he wanted to do was to bring in his own people. And he had gotten a heads up from the CIA and other intelligence agencies in the government that Mr. Ezra Cohen Watnick should be let go, transferred out of the NSC. When he attempted to do so, Mr. Watnick, who was a Mike Flynn supporter, went around Mr. McFarland directly to Steve Bannon and Donald Trump's son-in-law, I guess begging for his job. Well, Mr. Bannon saw an opportunity to mine an asset because, honestly, Bannon was a big supporter of Flynn, and he stuck with him until pretty much the very end. So he didn't have any problem mining this particular asset. So between he and Donald Trump's son-in-law, they convinced Trump to keep this guy over the objection of J.T. McFarland. Well, McFarland was no dummy, and he knew that there was going to be a fuck-up sooner or later. Sooner obviously occurred rather than later. What happened after that was Mr. Bannon told Mr. Watnick to data mine in order to obtain information regarding the unmasking of names that were provided by our intelligence agencies. And he needed to get specifically the name of a person who had unmasked people in the intelligence reports. And he needed a good one, someone like Susan Rice. Well, Mr. Watnick wasn't able to find Susan Rice, but he was able to find one or two other people who had unmasked names out of those reports. But somewhere along the line, Susan Rice's name came up, and we all know how Susan Rice's name is red meat for any Republican, and to this day, even though they keep talking about Benghazi, and it was documented that the intelligence agencies were the ones who provided the information that she went out and gave on those Sunday morning talk shows. So, but I digress. After Mr. Watnick obtained the information that was necessary in order to try to give Donald Trump some cover, Mr. Bannon advised him, along with a Michael Ellis and a National Security Council attorney, to utilize another asset. That asset was Devan Nunes. They called Mr. Nunes over to the White House in a clandestine manner, allowed him to see the information that they had data mined, and sent him back out there to act like he had discovered this information from, quote unquote, a source. When the truth finally came out, the stink started rising up the food chain. So it went from Mr. Nunes, who is totally in Donald Trump's pocket, and he needed to be removed as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, back to Ezra Watnick, who should have been fired if Mr. McFarland had his way, but his godfather, Steve Bannon, went to bat for him. He needed to be fired, along with Michael Ellis and the NSC attorney. But obviously there was a trail, and that trail led right back to Steve Bannon. Steve wasn't cute enough to cover his tracks, so that when the direct line went from Watnick to Bannon, Trump's son-in-law got pissed off about the whole thing, and I guess Trump did too, since now his hand is caught in the cookie jar. And that's what led to the removal of Steve Bannon from the National Security Council, and J.T. McFarland taking his rightful place as the leader of that council, and also elevating the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff back in as permanent members. I'm wondering how long Mr. Bannon is going to be in Siberia, because today Mr. Trump met with the King of Jordan, which obviously it doesn't get much more political than that. And Mr. Bannon is supposed to be his chief political advisor. He was nowhere to be seen. And when asked where Mr. Bannon was, they stated that, oh, he's up on the Hill trying to work on the health care reform bill that we're looking at trying to do again. Steve, I sure hope this is the beginning of the end, and in some way, shape, manner, or form, you get kicked all the way to the curb.